You're listening to So Much to Say here on TLV1. It's been 9 years after Rachel Corrie's family filed a civil suit against the state of Israel for the death of the American peace activist. The family is going to appeal the decision that the Haifa District Court gave in August of 2012, which concluded that the Israeli military was not responsible for Rachel's death and that it conducted a credible investigation. And tomorrow they will have their appeal heard before the Israeli Supreme Court. With me to speak about it is Cindy Corrie, mother of Rachel. Hi, Cindy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So it has been 9 years since you filed the initial suit against the state of Israel, and the Haifa District Court. It took quite a while until they ruled, and they completely ruled that the Israeli military was not responsible. What are you expecting from the Supreme Court decision?
Well, we brought the appeal because we think there are very serious issues to look at that were serious concerns that were raised by the decision of the judge in the district court. I know there will be 3 justices. We have provided our arguments. Our attorney, Hussein Abu Hussein, has provided those in writing. The state has been able to respond. And I'm expecting that we'll have not a long time, but a short time in court for our attorney to orally present our concerns about the verdict, for there to be, for the state to do the same, and then for the justices to carefully question and think about this. And I'm hoping very much that there will be a different outcome, and particularly related to international law and the role of international law and international humanitarian law here and how that applies in Israel and in the occupied territories.
Let's talk a little bit about the civil trial before the Haifa District Court. It began in 2010, and as we said, only concluded in 2012. Many witnesses testifying in dozens of hearings, spread over, as we said, almost 16 months. And you and your family attended almost each hearing. Is that correct? We
were at every hearing. We heard every word.
What did you hear? What was the testimony that you did hear from either side?
Well, there were 23 witnesses spread over 15 different days, and many of those were military witnesses. We did hear from the 2 people that were inside the Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. There was a driver and also a commander who was actually placed there to be a second set of eyes. I think some of the most concerning testimony that we heard, part of it was a discrepancy between those 2 people about where Rachel's body was when they first saw her after she had been run over by the bulldozer and after it had backed over her again. And the fact that testimony was never reconciled, the differences between them raised a lot of questions for us about what went wrong inside that bulldozer that day. Also, very concerning testimony coming from the lead investigator, Shalom, who was charged with doing a thorough, credible, and transparent investigation. That was what was promised to President Bush by Prime Minister Sharon. And the lead investigator actually said that it was his personal opinion that they were at war with everyone in the Gaza Strip, including the peace activists. And for us, that overarching view of the situation was very problematic in terms of actually ending up with an investigation that would meet the standards that we expected. We also heard from a high-level officer who had responsibility with the manuals, with how the machines were operated, that he believed there were no civilians in war. So that was some of the overarching testimony that I think was most troubling to us.
And of course, at the end, the judge did adopt the Israeli government's position that the military should be fully absolved of the civil liability because, as the testimony that you just mentioned, that there were no civilians in war. And this verdict, of course, raised tensions and was widely condemned internationally as well. President Jimmy Carter even stated that the court's decision confirmed a climate of impunity. The question is here, will the Israeli Supreme Court, with the testimonies that they do have, be able to rule differently, or will they have to reinterpret international law, as you stated in your opening?
I'm not an attorney, and so I'm not exactly sure about the course that the justices can take, what the options are that are open to them. But I hope that they will recognize the egregiousness of the decision that was made in the district court, and will realize that this has far-reaching implications that they really need to find a way to address.
And of course, at the end of the day, you are a mother, and you did lose your daughter in this terrible ordeal. Without going into the legal implications and the conclusions coming from the case, Rachel Corrie and her story has been used internationally as a symbol as well.
Well, Rachel was she was our third child. She was a beautiful human being, and I think people that come to know her through her writing, through her words, know that she had great love for people, for all the people here, really. And I think that it's the fact that certainly what she did that day was important, but it was also what she had to say about life and about what she was observing here. I think that have really resonated with people throughout the world.
At the time, did you approve, you and the family approve of her coming to this area and taking part?
You know, Rachel really brought us to this issue. We were, like a lot of American families, without a direct connection to the situation here. We had heard about it, of course, all our lives, and kind of set it aside as a problem, that just wasn't going to get solved. And then she brought us into it very directly, and our sympathies, our empathies were with the Israeli Jewish narrative. That's the one that we knew, and that's what we had shared with our family. And there were Palestinian Americans living in our community, and we didn't even know that. So Rachel brought us to it. It was, of course, worrisome to us when we heard that she was going to be coming here. But I also knew she was 23 years old. She had a great desire to find very meaningful things to do in her life. And she showed me that she wanted to learn, and she did a lot of looking at this before she made the journey here, and also did what she could to help our family understand why she was coming. So I think we just felt, while we, of course, felt concern, we felt a need to support her in the way she wanted to develop her life.
Cindy, how much faith do you and your family, and we'll put the lawyers on the side for now, have in the Israeli justice system? And if tomorrow does not go as you wish, what will be your next step?
I hold out hope. I held out hope in the district court, and I know many people felt that was very naive, but I wanted to believe that that the judge would see the questions that we raised and would look at the testimony and realize there was more to say about this than what he did. I held out hope until I heard those words translated to me in the court from his verdict. And so, of course, with three justices here, and with having been told through the years that sometimes the High Court really does act differently, and so I still have hope that will happen. I know that we're in an uphill battle here. I think that there are some serious concerns about the institutions that are driving things here in this country, but I still hope very much that with the panel of justices that we have, that there will be a favorable outcome.
Cindy, please stay with me on the line. I want to hear now from Professor Gerald Steinberg, the director of NGO Monitor. Professor Steinberg, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
As I spoke with Cindy earlier in our discussion, the Rachel Corrie case, if we can put it at that. It has become a symbol internationally for activists and organizations, humanitarian organizations, of course, worldwide. And of course, the verdict that they received from the Haifa District Court was condemned by them as being distorting the facts of what happened, despite, as I spoke with Cindy, the many hours of testimony that we did hear from both sides.
First of all, to lose a child in a tragic circumstance is very difficult. And certainly one can have sympathy for her parents on that grounds. And the desire to fight for the memory of that child and to claim and imagine that this was somehow done deliberately is something that perhaps can be understood, but it's a very serious problem. I think we should first start talking about the international solidarity movement, to which unfortunately, apparently, Rachel Corrie, as a young student, perhaps naively, was brought into. This is an organization, solidarity with whom? Solidarity with Palestinian terrorists, people who kill and maim and explode buses and schools and cafeterias and kill many Israelis and others.
The question is, though,
and the international solidarity movement was acting in order, in many cases. First of all, there are instances where the ISM provided a cover for terrorist activities, in the case of Mike's Bar in Tel Aviv, but also in this particular case was trying to prevent the protection of Israeli citizens from acts of terrorism. And whatever Rachel Corrie was doing there in trying to block the not only legitimate but absolutely necessary activities to protect Israeli citizens was wrong. She should not have been there. She should not have been sent there. And it was fundamentally, and that argument should not be forgotten. That main point should not be forgotten. And I would hope to hear from her parents, as bereaved as they are, the understanding and sympathy for an Israeli perspective. This was not a case of injustice to an innocent victim. It was an accidental death in a circumstance that could have been avoided had Rachel Corrie herself been a little or more aware of the way that she was being manipulated and the consequences of her actions in moral terms.
One of the testimonies that we did hear throughout the Haifa District Court's case was that an Israeli colonel testified saying that there are no civilians in war, and the military police investigator stated his belief that the Israeli military was at war with all in Gaza, including peace activists. Is this something that Israel or the Israeli government can be pushing forward, this kind of thinking?
There was a lot of testimony in this case. And to take one quote out of context and make that the center of an argument is not something that is either fair or moral. The fact is that this was an area of active terrorism and, again, Israeli military responses. I don't think anybody quarrels with that. If they did, they're wrong. And the fact that the international solidarity movement sent young, naive American students and other students to act as human shields to protect Palestinian terrorists was wrong. And I think if I would have been asked to give the testimony, perhaps that's the language that should have been used. But that's what the essence of the policy was. And the court ruled that the question was there deliberate negligence? Was there something that was done fundamentally wrong that would make the soldiers involved in this act guilty? And the answer is no. It was a tragic accident. You have this relatively small individual in a combat zone trying to act against an army which is doing its job, and she shouldn't have been there in the first place. Why would they have seen her? Why would they have known that she was there? It's a closed military zone. So accidents happen. They're tragic. But to try to penalize and ruin the lives of people who were doing what they had to be doing on a moral basis is itself immoral. And I would hope that Rachel Corrie's parents would accept the fact that they are being used for an immoral campaign around the world to demonize good people who are trying to live their lives in a very, very violent and dangerous environment, and that's Israel.
Professor Steinberg, I'm going to allow now Cindy Corrie, Rachel's mother, to respond. Cindy, is Professor Steinberg correct in saying that Rachel shouldn't have perhaps been there in the first place?
I think the larger question is, why weren't all of us there? At the time that Rachel was in Gaza, in the southern Gaza Strip, human rights organizations like B'Tselem, the Israeli Human Rights Organization, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, were calling on the Israeli military, the Israeli government, to halt massive home demolitions and also really brutal attacks against the Palestinian people. Before Rachel was killed in the southern Gaza Strip, the person who was in charge of that area was Pinky Swaritz, who testified in court. Not only were there other internationals killed under the time that he was in charge there, but once he took over in that area in about August of 2002, there were, according to B'Tselem, over 100 people not engaged in hostilities, civilians who were killed, and over 40 of those were children. Mm-hmm. I've been to the Gaza Strip. I saw the area. The family whose house Rachel stood in front of, and because it was threatened and eventually was demolished, not that day, but eventually, family members came to the United States. In order to do that, they had to be given permission by the Israeli authorities to come here inside Israel to get a visa at the American Embassy. They were granted that permission. They were granted permission to come to the United States by our authorities, and they traveled throughout the United States for over a month telling their own story. And Khalid Nasrallah talked about taking spackle. It's kind of like a concrete material.
Right.
Cover up the bullet holes that had been shot into the wall from the military going past, because he hoped that maybe if they covered the holes, that it wouldn't, that soldiers driving by in vehicles wouldn't use it for target practice. I think, a tenth of the population of Rafah lost their homes, and Rachel went there to try to challenge that. The ISM was founded according really to only two principles: that those who were involved believed in freedom for the Palestinian people according to international law, and that they used only nonviolent means of resistance. And I can assure everybody, I know my daughter, and I've met and know the people that she was staying with and working with in Gaza. And I think the characterization of them by Professor Steinberg is actually scandalous.
I'd like to have just one quick comment on this.
Okay, very quickly, because we do have to cut off.
Everybody can look up and learn the history and understand the distortions that we just heard, and they're very sad. But what we did not hear was a single word of sympathy for all the thousands of people, Israelis, who lost loved ones by massive terrorist bombings, many of which that came out of Gaza. And the fact that, unfortunately, the Corrie family is unable to express any sympathy, any human sympathy, and simply quotes things which they do not understand and cannot understand, and does it by rote, is itself an immoral tragedy. Okay, I would hope the Corrie family will stop being propagandists and become human beings and say, we understand the sympathy of Israelis who had children blown up to bits, and because of pure hatred of Israelis and Jews. That has to stop.
Professor Steinberg, thank you for joining us. And Cindy Corrie, thank you for joining us. Of course, the Israeli Supreme Court will be hearing your appeal tomorrow. The appeal, of course, is challenging the Haifa District Court's August ruling, 2012 ruling, which concluded that the Israeli military was not responsible for Rachel's death and that it conducted a credible investigation. Thank you to you both. We have more after the music.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.